almost 400,000 different species of plants, and many still ants have evolved to thrive in virtually every corner of our planet. This need to survive has led to some bizarre adaptations and survival techniques. Plants in today's video look nothing like the plants you'll find in the backyard. Join me. We're going to take a look at 15 of the most strange, unusual plant species on Earth. Number 15. The Asian bleeding heart. Native to regions across Siberia, northern China, Korea, and Japan, the Asian bleeding heart is a member of the poppy family. It's far different from the others you may be familiar with. This plant itself grows to around 47 inches, or about 1.2 meters tall, and during spring and early summer, it develops incredible flowers that hang off the branches. Made of bright pink lobed petals on the outside and white ones inside, they look like hearts with a droplet hanging beneath. Because of this, the plants have become a popular ornamental species that's grown all over Asia and beyond. So much so that it's even become difficult to know the exact regions they're native to and which areas they've been introduced to. They've long been part of the Chinese culture, with many legends featuring them, and are also used in traditional Chinese medicine. But ingestion of any part of this plant must be done carefully because of the presence of certain alkaloids throughout the stems. Throughout the stems, the leaves, and the petals, there's a risk of poisoning that, while unlikely to be fatal, could require hospital treatment. Number 14. Ghost plant. The ghost plant, which is known as the Indian pipe, is a perennial plant that's native to temperate regions across Asia and the Americas. Its Latin name, Monotropa uniflora, means one turn and one flowered, which is in reference to the way that it grows with a curved stem for each individual flower. What's unusual, though, is that the ghost plant is normally almost completely white with occasional red speckles. If you look closer, you'll see that some parts are translucent, too. This means that no part of the plant contains any chlorophyll, so it can't produce energy by photosynthesis like most others do. Instead, this is a parasitic plant that will grow on specific types of fungi that themselves grow on trees. So the ghost plant essentially leaches all the nutrients it needs from those trees. This means that they can grow where other plants can't, such as in dark areas or places covered in thick vegetation. But because of these particular conditions they need to thrive, they're almost impossible to propagate in a home setting. They're said to have a flavor similar to asparagus. These ghost plants contain small quantities of toxins that can be harmful to humans in large enough doses, but have for centuries been used in traditional medicines where the chemicals they contain have been found to help treat anxiety. Number 13. White baneberry. Doll's eyes, also known as white baneberry, is a flowering plant that's native across North America, particularly in eastern Canada and the Midwestern and eastern United States. It tends to grow in moist and shady environments and flowers between May and June each year. They're easy to spot because of their striking appearance. Growing feet are about 60 centimeters tall. The most noticeable thing about them is their white berries with purple pupils, from which they get their name. The berries are themselves supported by vivid pink stems. It's a good thing that these berries aren't that appetizing, though, because they're classified as being poisonous to humans. They contain a cocktail of cardiogenic toxins, which, if ingested, can have a sedative effect on the human cardiac tissue, effectively shutting your heart down and leading to cardiac arrest or, in extreme cases, death. The presence of these toxins in the plants means they're also occasionally used in medicine. Tiny quantities of roots are used to brew tea that helps relieve pains of childbirth, as well as headaches and coughs. Great care must be taken when preparing this, of course, because you only need a minute dosage to benefit from it. Number 12. Night-blooming cereus. The night-blooming cereus is a stunning species of cacti that's native to arid regions of China, and it's another flower that's incredibly rare to see. There are a number of different species, each of which produce a glorious display of petals that are usually white or slightly translucent in color. As the name would suggest, the unusual thing about them is that the flowers only emerge when it's dark, and in many of the species they'll only actually bloom one night every year. By the time the sun rises in the morning, it will have already begun to wilt, so timing is absolutely critical if you want to ever see one at its best. The reason for this is that the plants rely on very specific types of nocturnal insects and animals to carry the pollen to other plants, so it only releases the rich aroma when these animals are active. There is a great demand for the flowers in their native regions, where dried petals are used in certain types of Cantonese soups, and some night-blooming cereus even produce fruits that are large enough for humans to consume. Because of this demand, there are now a range of places that grow them for commercial purposes. So while you can be almost guaranteed to see one in bloom at one of these facilities, the chances of seeing one in the wild remain extremely unlikely. Number 11. Black bat flower. The Taka chantrieri, which is more often known as the black bat flower, is a species that grows in Southeast Asia, most commonly in Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, and Laos. It's actually classified in the same species as yams, but take on a very different appearance than the ones you're used to on the dinner table. Preferring to grow in shady places with well-drained soil, they get their name because of their amazing flowers that are almost entirely black in color. Each of these flowers can reach a size of almost 12 inches, or about 30 centimeters across, and take on a shape that looks very similar to the silhouette of a bat. Attached to the flowers, the plant also grows a series of whisker-like structures that can reach up to 24 inches, or 60 centimeters in length. In the wild, they're normally found in forests and along rivers and in valleys, and it had for a long time been a mystery how they pollinate. Some types of black bat flower, though, produce a foul smelling scent, and it's now believed that they actually rely on flies to take the pollen from one plant to another.
I would say that the best thing I can say about my internet service is that I never have to think about it.
You must have flies to take the pollen from one plant to another while they're in search of decaying flesh. Number 10. Shy plant. There are countless species of plants that are capable of moving in response to a stimulus, but such as the Venus flytrap that will quickly close when it detects movement within the trap. But the shy plant, which is actually in the pea family, believes in a far stranger way. It's a species native to the Caribbean and the Americas, but because of how unusual it has since been taken all around the world, and when growing in the wild, is often regarded as an unwelcome weed. Growing to a height of around a foot, or about 30 centimeters, and with purple flower heads that last for less than 24 hours. Each leaf is actually made up of a series of leaflets, and these are what make the plant so interesting. They're responsive to the slightest changes in their environment, like touching, warming, blowing, and shaking, and when they detect these, they'll close up almost instantaneously. Amazingly, this response is possible because the leaflets are being held in place by a structure called a pulvinus, and when it receives the signal, it relaxes and causes the leaflet to droop. The ability of this plant to behave in this way in any situation that's uncomfortable for it means that it's popular in research because it's clear straight away whether changes in the environment are beneficial or not. It's used, for example, to test various chemicals that have been designed for use in farming, or to try to further understand plant behavior in changing light conditions, or oxygen and carbon dioxide concentrations in the air around them. Number 9. Buddhist Udumbara. The Udumbara flower is possibly the most mysterious plant in the world. It's extremely rare to see, something that's made even more difficult by the fact that when fully grown, the flowers are at most just 1 millimeter in diameter. According to Buddhist legend, the plants only bloom once every 3,000 years, and while there have been more regular sightings than that in recent times, it's a testament to just how unlikely it is to ever see one. The small white flowers look very similar to lace-wing butterfly eggs, but there are some slight differences that allow you to tell the difference. Mainly the sweet scent of sandalwood that they emit, and the fact that the flowers don't disintegrate in the same way that the eggs do. They tend to grow in the most unlikely of places, such as on window ledges and tree branches, and it's hard to see them without the use of a microscope. Usually it's the smell that lets you know there are some nearby, and after careful searching you might just find out where they are. Because of their rarity, very little is actually known about the flower, but with a name that means auspicious flower from heaven, it usually is seen as a sign of great fortune whenever they emerge. Number 8. Cobra lily. Native to regions across Northern California and Oregon, the cobra lily is typically found in boggy places where there's plenty of flowing water, but it's increasingly rare to see one in the wild. They were given the name because their leaves are said to resemble a cobra in a defensive stance, and there's a secondary leaf that protrudes from it that's forked and looks like the snake's tongue. It's this unusual shape that allows it to trap insects to feed on. The plant pumps water into the interior through its roots, and it directs the creatures into this well by having slippery walls and downward-facing hairs that mean they're unable to get any grip to try to escape. Even if an insect that's entered in search of a sweet-smelling aroma does realize what's happening, the cobra lily has a backup plan. There's only a tiny entrance hole which is covered, and there are several false exits that are blocked by a translucent substance. It's virtually impossible to find a way back out again, so if the initial trap doesn't work, an insect will more than likely run out of energy to try to find an exit, and will eventually drop back in. Once the prey falls into the water, its body begins to be broken up by various different enzymes, and the plant has specialized cells that are able to absorb those nutrients. Number 7. Strelitzia. The Strelitzia is a species that's indigenous to South Africa, and once you see it, it becomes immediately clear why it's more commonly known as the bird of paradise flower. Growing to up to 6.5 feet or almost 2 meters tall, it develops large leaves that can be up to 30 inches or 76 centimeters long, and flowers that stand above the leaves and at the very tip of the stalk. Not only does the hardened leaf at the top, called the spathe, look just like the beak of a bird, but it also provides a steady landing spot for sunbirds, which are the main pollinators for this type of plant. The flowers emerge from the spathe and are made up of 3 orange sepals and 3 blue or white petals which fuse together to give an easy route for birds to drink the nectar. While they're doing this, the petals open up further to deposit pollen on the bird's feet, which then will be deposited on the next Strelitzia landing pad that they fly to. Unsurprisingly, the incredible appearance of this plant means that it's a popular ornamental variety around the world, where individual plants will thrive anywhere that it's warm and have plenty of sunshine. It's not all that difficult to look after either, and will grow in virtually any soil type. It doesn't need to be watered too often.
I'm going to tell you the easiest way to make money at home, and you 100% have never heard of this before. So most people
to look after either, and will grow in virtually any soil type. It doesn't need to be watered too often. If you decide to grow one yourself, you should expect to wait up to 5 years before the plant's mature enough to flower, but once it's ready, you'll be treated to flower growth several times every summer. Number 6. Vegetable sheep. Traveling around New Zealand, the type of livestock you're most likely to see are sheep. But to make things more complicated, what you think is a sheep from a distance may not actually be any kind of animal at all. There are around 30 species of plant called the Rafelsia, which is better known as the vegetable sheep, or by its original Maori name, Tutahuna. They're types of cushion plants that grow fluffy white plant clusters, and when seen from far away can easily be mistaken for a sheep by someone who hasn't seen them before. The stems within the plants are so branched and tightly packed that it's only the buds of the flower, which never unfold, that are visible. In some species, this creates such a strong structure that it can be safely sat on. This is a feature that the plant massively benefits from. They usually grow on exposed hillsides and dry, rocky alpine areas, and in these places there's very little water. When combined with strong winds, the water the plants are able to absorb would normally be dried out. But the shell the flowers create, along with the remains of the rotted leaves beneath the surface, creates the ideal water storage vessel. The white coloration is no coincidence either, and it's believed to be a result of the fact that there are very few specialist flower visitors, like social bees in the regions they grow, that plants elsewhere would rely on to pollinate. Instead, the white buds attract insects, and they are then used to transport the pollen between the plants. Number 5. Corkscrew plant. There are around 30 different species of corkscrew plant that can be found in damp grounds across Africa and Central South America. Unlike most species of plants, they don't actually grow any roots and instead develop a complex network of underground traps that are specifically designed to capture and digest microorganisms, in particular protozoans. Looking no different from other herb-like plants from above ground, their traps are made up of hollow, round stalks that burrow into the ground in a spiral shape. Microorganisms spend their lives feeding on the roots of various plant species, but if they're unfortunate enough to find a corkscrew plant, it'll be the last thing they ever do. The traps have a series of openings along them, and once something enters one, there's no going back. The opening closes behind them, and they become trapped within a network of hair-like structures that push the organism towards the main part of the plant. During this journey, it's digested by enzymes within the trap, and by the time it reaches the end, all that's left is a nutritious liquid that the plant can absorb. All this happens underground and to microorganisms. It was only discovered in 1998 that corkscrew plants were proved to be carnivorous, even though Charles Darwin himself suggested this might be the case more than a century earlier. Number 4. Maypop passion flower. Passion flowers are so named because they're said to be one of the most romantic-looking groups of plants. But the one that stands out the most has to be the variety known as the maypop. Technically, a fast-growing vine, they are one of the toughest species of wildflower and are native to regions across the U.S. With stems that can grow virtually unimpeded, the plant develops large leaves up to 6 inches or 15 centimeters long, and a highly unusual flower that can be purple or blue and is covered in tendril-like structures. They have 5 petals, develop a noticeable whitish corona at the center, and rely on bees and other insects for pollination. It's such a standout species that, as well as being the Tennessee state wildflower, they've been used for hundreds of years by the Cherokee in the area as food and medicine. It forms such an important part of the culture where it's known as the Ocoee, and the Ocoee River Valley and the Appalachian Mountains were named after it. Still, to this day, the unique flavor of this passion flower means that it, along with the fruits it produces, is often used in food products, and is particularly suited to being used as the main flavoring ingredient in jams, jellies, and desserts. Number 3. Posidonia oceanica. Posidonia oceanica, as the name would suggest, is a species of underwater seagrass that grows in the Mediterranean Sea. It grows in huge meadows, some of which can be up to 5 miles or 8 kilometers across, and consist of colonies of millions of individuals, some of which are thought to be up to 100,000 years old. In total, they cover about 3% of the floor of the Mediterranean, which is the equivalent of about 15,000 square miles. They grow between depths of 3 and 115 feet, or about 1 and 35 meters, as long as the water is clear enough, and grow large ribbon-like leaves that can be almost 5 feet or 1.5 meters long. Each shoot can live for up to 30 years, but they are very slow growing, only adding a maximum of about 2.5 inches each year. As with many plant species, this one is thought to be in decline. The waters of Med are becoming increasingly polluted, and it's believed to be really susceptible to this. This could cause severe consequences to the local ecosystem if measures aren't introduced to slow down this reduction, because so many marine animals are reliant on the nutrients they provide, and it's responsible for the absorption of most of the region's carbon dioxide. Number 2. Lithops. Normally when you see a plant, you'd expect there to be green leaves and a colorful flower. But for a group of ice plants known as lithops, things couldn't be further from that. Found across countries throughout southern Africa, they've developed an ingenious way to avoid being eaten by hungry animals, making themselves look like something far less appetizing: rocks. For most of their life cycle, they have fused leaves that curl over one another to give this appearance, which is normally a shade of cream, gray, or brown to keep up the ruse. There is, however, a small slit between the leaves, and it's through there that, when ready, a colorful flower will emerge to attract insects and other animals to enable pollination. Due to the scorching temperatures during certain parts of the year in their native habitats, lithops tend to lay dormant during extremely hot weather, and actually do most of their growing during the cooler months. This is because they don't have many leaves that other plants use to cool themselves down through, and the only means they have to mitigate the heat is by growing large parts underground where it's cooler. Because of their unique look and their sweet scent they emit when flowering, lithops have become a popular type of succulent houseplant. They're fairly easy to look after, so long as they aren't allowed to get too cold and are regularly watered. Number 1. Rafelsia. The Rafelsia arnoldii is known for producing the largest single flowers of any plant species on Earth. Endemic to the islands of Sumatra and Borneo, they are one of Indonesia's national flowers and grow deep within the rainforests. It's rare to see one in the wild, but when you do, there's nothing quite like it. They rely on insects to pollinate, so emit a horrendous smell of death to attract them into the flower, which has led them to also being known as the corpse lily. The flower itself will grow to around 3.5 feet, or around 1 meter in diameter, and can weigh as much as 24 pounds, or almost 11 kilos. Furthermore, these don't emerge from a large plant structure, but instead are a species that lives as a parasite on several types of vine. There are therefore no leaves, stems, or roots, and they instead grow strands in a similar way to a fungus that take the nutrients they need from the plants that they're growing on. Rafelsia arnoldii are difficult to find in the rainforest. Their buds take many months to grow, and when they're ready to open, they're only able to collect enough nutrients to support the massive flowers for several days at a time. I'll see you next time. Watch our nature playlist for more top 15